The Emperor's bones are singing, and their song is wrong. I am tech interrogator Kalen Voss, Ordo Hereticus adjunct with Mechanicus grade Augmetics, recording this testimony from sub-level Oscillinium 9 Black beneath the Sanctum Imperialis. The date is 847.M41, and we stand where saints' relics sleep in adamantine vaults that have not stirred for millennia. 47 minutes ago, Saint Remy Sephour's femur extruded calcified filaments overnight, like bone coral reaching towards something unseen. And for exactly 40 heartbeats, the Astronomican's eternal thunder vanished beneath our feet. That silence tasted of void and ancient fear, a wound in reality that should not exist on Holy Terror. The stakes demand immediate action. Spreading osseous anomaly in the Emperor's palace. Scheduled Astronomican recalibration in 36 hours. 17 custodial personnel missing from morning rotation. Containment protocols failing in ways that mock Imperial engineering. My team represents the finest available for such blasphemous mysteries. Magos Ossificator Lyris 5 adjusts her ossimetric auspex with chrome fingers designed for relic manipulation, speaking Binharic cant that carries funeral undertones. Sister Superior Malia of the Order of the Ebon Chalice bears a rosary of Saint Fingerbones and Flamer blessed by Cardinal Vex, her scarred face set in perpetual prayer beneath her hood. Astropath Polave clutches her psychic hood against pale skull, whispering of marrow dreams that should not exist in waking hours. Skitari Manipul Theta Grey 7 maintains perfect formation despite their sensors painting ghost returns that correlate with no physical obstacles. Galvanic rifles humming with blessed oils. Environmental wrongness pervades everything like fever in stone. Incense fog mingles with metallic dampness that tastes of copper and forgotten prayers, while frost forms impossibly on bronze skull reliquaries despite humid vault conditions. The recurring motifs dominate our descent, a triad click pattern of 312 echoing through corridors with mechanical precision. The litany phrase, from dust to duty, carved in wall alcoves, sant bones arranged in helical geometry that hurts to contemplate. My chronometer records impossible telemetry. Humidity dropping 23% in sealed chambers, pressure spikes corresponding to no atmospheric disturbance. Binharic noise floor at negative 17 decibels, carrying whispers in machine cant. We advance through corridors lined with 10,000 martyrs' remains, each bone tagged with purity seals in languages dead before the Great Crusade. The walls breathe with subtle expansion matching no human respiratory pattern, floor stones bearing stress fractures arranged like neural pathways etched in living rock. Malia's Flamer pilot light flickers blue-white instead of orange, while Lyris 5's mechadendrite tendrils twitch toward bone fragments as if drawn by undetectable magnetism. Skitari report targeting, fluctuations painting friend-foe unknown markers on empty air, their machine spirits confused by emanations registering as simultaneously sacred and profane. Temperature drops despite geothermal systems, our breath becoming visible fog in recycled air, carrying ancient tallow scent and something organic that reminds me of mortuary chambers where I first learned to distinguish blessed death from corruption. Polave stumbles against compressed fingerbone walls, hissing that stone listens with embedded teeth, her psychic senses detecting awareness where none should exist. Vox channels crackle with interference, forming words in languages I recognize but cannot translate, while servo skulls circle in flight patterns spelling numerals, 312, endlessly repeated like countdown or mantra. We reach the triple-sealed adamantine door, guarding deepest vault levels, its surface inscribed with combined Mechanicus and Ecclesiarchy seals, blessed when the Emperor walked among men. Locking mechanisms require sacred oils and blessed unguents, binary cant and high Gothic prayers, sanctified flesh and holy metal. As Lyris 5 begins unlocking rites with reverent precision, mechadendrite tendrils weaving through lock tumblers while chanting the litany of opening in Binharic harmony, I notice the door's surface shows stress patterns suggesting internal pressure pushing outward, as if something seeks emergence with patient, inexorable will. The final lock disengages with bone-breaking sound, door swinging on hinges unmoved for millennia. Beyond lies darkness our luminators cannot penetrate, air tasting of copper and old prayers, the sound of something vast breathing in 3-1-2 rhythm. We step forward to investigate, and the impossible occurs. Reliquary masonry beyond the threshold has budded pale lattice structures pulsing with organic rhythm, then whispering through vox channels in perfect Binharic cant, addressing me by my childhood Terran name that appears in no imperial record. We descended via the ossified mortise rails, ancient bone conveyor systems that once transported saint relics through palace catacombs during the age of apostasy, their vertebrae fused into continuous tracks, pulsing with peristaltic motion beneath our boots. I maintained clinical recording discipline, while environmental wrongness escalated with systematic precision, air thinning with each meter of descent as incense fog yielded to metallic dampness, coating throat and lungs with copper taste. Ash flecks drifted like snow from unknown sources above our heads, powdered bone infiltrating our filtration systems despite sealed atmospheric recycling, forcing manual breathing apparatus activation, while my chronometer recorded atmospheric composition shifting beyond acceptable parameters. Theta Grey maintained staggered overwatch formation with galvanic rifles, tracking movement signatures, their auspexes painting ghost returns, correlating with no physical obstacles yet triggering friend-foe unknown responses from machine spirits grown agitated by proximity to whatever waited below. Environmental hazards manifested with intelligence rather than random decay. A loader servitor we encountered recited Confessional 7, backward in perfect high Gothic, its vocal apparatus functioning despite century-old death, empty eye sockets weeping thin fluid that steamed in cold air. Catechism bells tolled from chambers our Auspex maps showed as empty. Bronze voices carrying harmonies in 3-1-2 rhythm that made Polar Vey clutch her psychic hood and whisper of marrow dreams bleeding into waking consciousness. I invoked Ordinance 112 Alpha for emergency vault custodianship, my Rosette authority overriding standard protocols, while Binharic chatter recorded 312 ping repeating every 4.7 seconds through vox channels. Lyris 5's mechadendrite tendrils sampled air composition, chrome fingers dancing across data slate keys cataloging impossible readings, bone dust concentration exceeding atmospheric saturation limits, trace minerals indicating active osteogenesis in supposedly inert reliquary materials, electromagnetic signatures suggesting neural activity in calcified structures dead for millennia. Her olfactory sensors detected formaldehyde traces and embalming fluids that should not exist in consecrated reliquary spaces. Religious dread permeated our descent as Sister Malia tasted old marrow in recycled air, her scarred face tightening with recognition of corruption transcending mere heresy. She began cleansing litanies in Low Gothic, each phrase answered by echoes from bone walls, repeating her words with subtle variations, changing blessed syllables into something that made her flamer pilot light flicker and dance. The Order of the Ebon Chalice trained her to recognize 17 categories of spiritual contamination, but this wrongness defied classification, existing in spaces between sacred and profane, where imperial doctrine offered no guidance. Body horror manifested in subtle violations of natural law. The loader servitor's knuckle flexed despite century of death, joints moving with wet sounds that should not emerge from desiccated bone and preserved flesh. My augmetic ulna vibrated sympathetically with unknown frequencies, titanium steel resonating like tuning fork, struck by invisible mallet, the tremor traveling up my arm into clavicle with steady 3-1-2 beat displacing natural heartbeat rhythm. Polar Vey stumbled against corridor walls, psychic senses detecting awareness in stone and bone, whispered conversations in languages predating human speech, yet carrying meaning, bypassing conscious understanding to speak directly to primitive brain centers governing fear and reverence. Temperature continued dropping despite geothermal systems, our breath-forming ice crystals that tinkled like wind chimes striking bone surfaces. Humidity condensed as frost on weapon barrels and exposed skin, while scent of ancient tallow grew stronger with each downward step. Vox lag increased to 0.8 seconds before cutting to clean silence, resuming with fragmented transmission, carrying authority I did not recognize. Oscillonium anomaly, designated Boneforge protocol. The words spoke in voice that might be human, or something wearing human vocal patterns like ill-fitting garment. The mortise rails terminated at massive door carved from compressed femurs, surface stamped with fused mechanicus ecclesiarchal seals, glowing faintly in our luminator beams. Sacred oils and blessed unguents marked its frame, while binary cant and high Gothic prayers spiraled across surface in helical patterns, hurting to follow with unaugmented vision. As Lyris 5 approached to begin unlocking rites, mechadendrite tendrils weaving through lock mechanisms with reverent precision, the impossible occurred. Bone door flexed like living cartilage, unlocking itself to match our approach cadence, responding to our presence with organic awareness, violating every principle of imperial engineering. The seals unknotted themselves like obedient cords, and clean line of chill flowed into us, heavy with Binharic whispers I had first heard at threshold above, the voice knowing my forgotten name. Our auspex panes jittered as corridor beyond registered, then misregistered, distance reels slipping like wet tape before resetting to impossible figure. When measurement steadied, it announced passage beyond had grown by exactly 312 meters since last survey, as though ossuary had drawn breath and lengthened its lungs to make room for us, the number carrying significance, escaping conscious analysis, yet resonating in augmetic neural pathways, with harmonic frequency matching persistent 312 ping echoing through Vox channels as we advanced into wrongness, tasting of copper and old prayers. I maintained data collector precision through systematic reliquary audit, cross-referencing the saint's catalogue against brass tags and purity seals, while environmental wrongness escalated beyond mere atmospheric anomaly. Inventory discrepancies violated every principle of imperial cataloguing doctrine. Relic ribs missing from sealed caskets, yet appearing duplicated in adjacent chambers. Finger bones bearing identical sigils despite originating from saints separated by millennia. Inventory numbers referencing martyrs whose canonization records existed in no imperial archive. Lyris 5 detected Binharic inscriptions etched directly into ossified trabeculae, microscopic characters embedded within marrow structure itself rather than surface engraving. The numbers forming base 8 progression of 312, repeating through calcium matrices, like digital genetics, encoding information in bone rather than flesh. The Astronomican's distant psychic throb, that eternal heartbeat of holy terror, felt by every imperial citizen from birth to death, had been replaced by subsonic void hum carrying harmonics that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity and skull. Palace acoustics, calibrated across 10 millennia to carry prayer and proclamation through stone corridors, dampened to unnatural silence that swallowed footsteps and whispered words alike. My chronometer recorded impossible atmospheric readings, humidity oscillating at harmonic intervals, pressure differentials marching in 312 rhythm like infantry on parade, electromagnetic signatures suggesting neural activity in calcified structures dead for millennia. Sister Malia pressed her relic rosary against corridor walls, the blessed bone beads adhering to stone surface as though wall possessed wet flesh beneath mineral facade. She tore them free with visible effort, oil-slick residue stringing between bead and rock, while her scarred face tightened with recognition of corruption transcending mere heresy. The Order of the Ebon Chalice trained her to recognize 17 categories of spiritual contamination, but this wrongness defied classification, existing in spaces between sacred and profane, where imperial doctrine offered no guidance. Technical fusion with religious elements manifested in violations of material science that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with alarm. The rib-tagged Saint Remis 4 vibrated in my gloved hand with frequency matching earlier click pattern, calcium structure resonating like struck bell, despite bone's natural dampening properties. Heat sensation emanated from supposedly dead bone, calcium warmth that should not exist in preserved relics, maintained at constant temperature for centuries. I cited Ordinance 9 Mors to justify forced disassembly of suspicious relics, my Rosette authority overriding custodial protocols, while Theta Grey maintained defensive perimeter, with galvanic rifles tracking movement signatures appearing and vanishing like heat mirages. Body horror escalated through subtle violations of death's finality. My servo skull's optical array flickered without authorization, mechanical eyes focusing on invisible targets, while transmitting machine cant in dialects predating the Omnissiah's revelation. The skull's bone components, harvested from loyal servant centuries dead, showed stress fractures forming geometric patterns that hurt to contemplate directly. Polar stumbled against reliquary walls, psychic senses detecting awareness in stone and bone, whispered conversations in languages bypassing conscious understanding to speak directly to primitive brain centers governing reverence and terror. Rule change revelations struck with theological implications transcending mere technical malfunction. Lyris 5 spoke Binharic cant to calm her agitated drones, sacred machine language carrying prayers to the Omnissiah through blessed vocal apparatus enhanced with augmetic resonators. The bones replied with perfect checksum verification, calcium structures understanding and responding to sacred code with accuracy exceeding most. Cogitators, wall-mounted relics pulsed in harmony with her transmitted prayers, creating network of responsive nodes, communicating through frequencies that made my augmetic ulna vibrate sympathetically with increasing intensity. Environmental shifts accelerated beyond atmospheric anomalies into geometric impossibilities. Corridor dimensions fluctuated on Auspex readings, adding and subtracting meters before locking at new values that violated architectural surveys conducted monthly for 10 millennia. Floor stones rippled beneath our boots like organic membrane responding to footstep pressure, while temperature continued dropping despite sealed atmospheric systems, frost-forming whirls and spirals on weapon barrels that matched helical patterns carved in wall alcoves. Discovery of Skull Vault terminated systematic audit, with revelation transcending mere inventory discrepancy. 312 skulls arranged in spiral formation, jaws wired open with blessed copper wire, emitted pressure hymn bypassing auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity and neural tissue. Each skull bore different saint's sigil, yet harmonized in perfect mathematical progression, creating sonic architecture that existed in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry. The hymn carried meaning encoded in frequency rather than language, information transmitted through bone conduction into augmetic neural pathways, where it registered as both prayer and technical specification. Polar whispered words she claimed to hear through psychic resonance, her voice carrying cadences that made corridor stones pulse with sympathetic vibration. From dust to duty, from bone to code. The phrase triggered architectural response as corridor ahead doubled back impossibly, creating geometric loop that violated fundamental principles of three-dimensional space. Behind us, bone door sealed with fresh growth, calcified filaments weaving across threshold like living sutures, trapping us within impossible topology. The rib in my hand responded to Binharic exchange, vibrating with renewed intensity before emitting machine cant clicks, identifying itself as key spline and requesting insertion into sternum-shaped keyway that opened in the stone wall before us, dark anatomical aperture forming from living rock, while my chronometer recorded exactly 312 seconds elapsed since entering the reliquary, the number carrying significance that resonated in augmetic neural pathways with frequency matching persistent hymn echoing through chambers where saints' bones sang mathematics and death had learned to dream. I balanced duty against growing wrongness in flesh and stone, refusing keyway insertion despite the rib's insistent vibration in my gloved hand, ordering lateral sweep following containment protocol Theta 9, while environmental hazards escalated beyond atmospheric anomaly into biological impossibility. Bone dust clotted our filtration systems despite sealed atmospheric recycling, microscopic calcium particles penetrating molecular barriers with intelligence rather than random infiltration, forcing manual breathing apparatus activation, while humidity condensed as frost on weapon barrels and exposed skin, despite geothermal heating systems maintaining constant temperature for 10 millennia. The scent of ancient tallow pervaded recycled air, growing stronger with each breath, carrying undertones of embalming fluid and something organic that reminded me of mortuary chambers where death learned patience through ritual and time. Body horror intensified through violations of death's finality that mocked imperial understanding of biological law. A janitor-servitor slumped in wall niche jerked like puppet on invisible strings, then extruded new phalanges from split glove skin with soft cartilage sound. Fresh bone blooming where no blueprint permitted growth, while its cogitator stuttered children's catechism backward in perfect high Gothic. Skitari, Theta Grey 7's trigger finger calcified mid-pull, proximal knuckle whitening like candle wax poured over flesh until Sister Malia shattered the growth with sanctified boot heel. Blessed ceramite crushing calcium deposits that reformed immediately like malignant coral seeking anchorage in living tissue. Polavey pressed her palm against corridor walls, hissing that stone listened with teeth embedded in its surface, her psychic senses detecting awareness in mineral structures that should contain no consciousness. The wall responded to her touch with subtle warmth, rock surface yielding like flesh beneath stone facade, while oil-slick residue strung between palm and wall, steaming in cold air, as whispered conversations in languages bypassing conscious understanding, carried meaning that made primitive brain centers spike with reverence and terror. Religious and military fusion manifested in desperate countermeasures against wrongness-defying classification. Sister Malia led the litany of unbinding in Low Gothic, each phrase carrying blessed authority, while Lyris 5 overlaid anti-corrosion Binharik cant through augmetic vocal apparatus enhanced with sacred resonators. Their harmonized frequencies triggered sympathetic response in bone structures, calcium matrices pulsing with organic rhythm in 312 cadence, creating sonic architecture that existed in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry, while walls sighed with pressure equalization. Present tense slipped through clinical recording discipline during sensory beat bypassing conscious analysis. Floor ripples beneath my boots like organic membrane, stone surface yielding to footstep pressure with elasticity, violating fundamental principles of mineral physics. The sensation lasted 3.7 seconds before reverting to normal rigidity, leaving stress fractures forming geometric patterns that hurt to contemplate directly, while my chronometer recorded impossible telemetry suggesting architectural growth rather than measurement error. Environmental dominance shifted atmospheric conditions beyond temperature variation into biological wrongness. Gale force cold burst from vent pits, followed by absolute stillness that swallowed sound and movement alike, while frost whirls sketched helical patterns on floor stones, matching geometric arrangements throughout ossuary levels. Ash drizzled from unlit thuribles suspended from ceiling beams, powdered bone mixing with incense residue, creating precipitation tasting of copper and forgotten prayers when inhaled through compromised filtration systems. Negative space horror manifested through absence rather than presence. The Astronomican's ever-present psychic ache, eternal heartbeat of holy terror, felt by every imperial citizen from birth to death, vanished completely within geometric loop created by corridors' impossible doubling back. Choir's ocean roar, distant but constant background to all palace activity, replaced by black delta of silence that made Polavey convulse with psychic feedback. Scarred features contorting as she whispered words claiming to hear through resonance with something vast and patient, waiting beneath ossuary levels. Technical revelation emerged through Lyris V's analysis of pressure hymn modulation patterns. Sacred machine language translated harmonic frequencies as modulation key. Mathematical progression encoding information in bone structure rather than digital storage. While Systemalia declared the arrangement blasphemous corruption requiring immediate consecration and burning. I ordered telemetry burst through Vox spine, attempting surface communication despite growing interference. Comms insert crackled through static. Terra Vox station receiving, signal attenuated. Astronomicon variance detected at your coordinate. Time window reduced to 18 hours. The transmission fragmented before mechanized voice recited Emperor's catechism backward. Violation of sacred liturgy that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with alarm, while implications crystallized. Astronomicon destabilizing from within Palace itself through unknown interference pattern. Wall segment thinned before our eyes through slow, sickening transformation. Polished adamantine facade dissolved, revealing underlying bone structure with marrow canals becoming visible like capillaries, pulsing with unknown circulation, emitting sickly yellow light from within. Architecture becoming transparent, revealing true horrifying nature, while Theta Grey maintained overlapping field coverage, despite auspexes flickering with phantom contacts, painting friend-foe unknown markers on empty air. The access plate heaved upward from floor stones, something beneath ossuary demanding emergence with patient inexorable will, while Polar Vey vomited blood and declared we stood in his silence. The Emperor's deliberate quiet, like held breath before speaking, as metallic dampness gave way to scent, rising from depths where saints' bones sang mathematics and death dreamed of resurrection through 3-1-2 rhythm echoing in chambers that should not exist beneath holy terror. I captured bureaucratic horror through clinical recording discipline as protocols failed where they should never fail, forcing the team into method the Palace taught me before augmetics, when geometry lies, map by what cannot pretend. We worked by scent and temperature using combat doctrine, Theta Grey reforming in tight column with bounding overwatch, while galvanic rifles hummed with blessed oils. Environmental dominance shifted beyond atmospheric anomaly into meteorological warfare. Gale force cold burst from vent pits with hurricane intensity, followed by absolute stillness that swallowed sound and movement alike, creating pressure differentials that made our ears pop, while frost whirls sketched helical patterns on floor stones with mathematical precision matching 3-1-2 geometry throughout ossuary levels. Negative space horror manifested through absence rather than presence, violations of reality's fundamental constants that struck deeper than any physical threat. The Astronomicon's ever-present psychic ache, eternal heartbeat of holy terror, felt by every imperial citizen from birth to death, vanished completely within our geometric loop for exactly 6 minutes. I counted with chronometer and blood, and the persistent throbbing in my augmetic ulna, while choir's ocean roar, distant but constant background to all palace activity, replaced by black delta of silence that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity. Polar Vey convulsed with psychic feedback, scarred features contorting as blood vessels burst in her eyes, whispering that we stood in his silence, the Emperor's deliberate quiet like held breath before speaking. Technical revelation emerged through Lyris V's spectral analysis of pressure hymn modulation patterns. Sacred machine language translated harmonic frequencies as mathematical progression encoding information in bone structure rather than digital storage, calcium matrices functioning as biological cogitators, processing data through organic chemistry rather than blessed silicon. She spoke numbers with reverent precision. If we speak back in pressure, we may retune it. Systemalia tightened her rosary until St. Bede's left white circles in scarred skin, declaring the arrangement blasphemous corruption requiring immediate consecration and burning, her voice carrying blessed authority, while flamer pilot light flickered blue-white instead of orange. I ordered telemetry burst through Vox spine, attempting surface communication, despite growing interference, that made static patterns form geometric shapes in audio spectrum. Comms insert crackled through dimensional barrier. Terra Vox station receiving. Signal attenuated. Astronomican variance detected at your coordinate. Time window reduced to 18 hours. The transmission fragmented as mechanized voice. Recited Emperor's Catechism with reversed cadence. Violation of sacred liturgy that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with alarm while implications crystallized. Astronomican destabilizing from within Palace itself through unknown interference pattern, rolling blackout spreading through choir cells above our coordinate. Environmental architecture became transparent through sickening transformation that revealed true nature of our surroundings. Wall segment thinned until polished adamantine facade dissolved like ice under thawing river, exposing underlying bone structure with marrow canals becoming visible like capillaries, pulsing with sickly yellow light from within calcium matrices. Granules like sand flexed in wave patterns, while tiny white motes flowed the opposite direction, their crossings making soft clicks I felt in my teeth. The revelations struck with theological implications. We moved through living ossuary, architecture composed of saints' bones, fused into structural elements that retained consciousness despite centuries of supposed death. Body horror escalated through biological wrongness that mocked imperial understanding of life and death. Wall-mounted relics pulsed in harmony with transmitted prayers, creating network of responsive nodes communicating through frequencies that made my servo skull's optical array flicker without authorization. Bone components showing stress fractures forming geometric patterns that hurt to contemplate directly. My augmetic ulna vibrated sympathetically with increasing intensity. Titanium steel resonating like tuning forks struck by invisible mallet, while bone fragments embedded in floor stones flexed like living cartilage, despite preservation techniques designed to maintain structural integrity for millennia. Military formation maintained discipline despite impossible circumstances. Theta Grey sustained overlapping field coverage, with weapons tracking phantom contacts that flickered on auspexes, painting friend-foe unknown markers on empty air, while their machine spirits grew agitated by proximity to whatever waited beneath access plate. Environmental pressure shifted as condensation ran red like thin blood from stone pores, air growing thick with scent of iron and ancient death mixed with formaldehyde traces, indicating mortuary origins, while ash drizzled from unlit thuribles, powdered bone mixing with incense residue, creating precipitation tasting of copper and forgotten prayers. Present tense slipped through clinical recording discipline during sensory beat. Access plate heaves upward from floor stones with grinding sound of bone against metal, something beneath ossuary demanding emergence with patient, inexorable will. The opening revealed shaft descending into darkness our luminators could not penetrate, air currents rising from depths, carrying scent of ancient tallow mixed with void and ancient fear. I marked containment stamp 13 Ossa on entry point with wax stylus, promise of later annihilation, while geometric patterns carved in shaft walls formed helical spirals encoding information in stone and bone. The stairs lurched violently as lattice grew barbs with deliberate intelligence, attempting to ensnare auramite figure stepping from egress vein, black-plumed shadow keeper with gold coal eyes whose first words carried authority transcending my rosette. Gold scraped against bone in shower of sparks as custodian tore free, leaving auramite scored and scarred, while Malia burned grasping filaments with promethium. Smoke reeking of charred marrow. The Shadowkeeper's voice cut through pressure him like blade through vellum. The heart calls, and you have answered. Now we descend where saints' bones sing mathematics, and death dreams of resurrection through 312 rhythm echoing from chambers that should not exist beneath holy terror. I balanced awe and dread descending through access plate into heart antechamber, maintaining clinical recording discipline while witnessing architecture that violated every principle of imperial engineering. The cathedral cogitator rose before us, built from fused skeletons, vertebrae functioning as precision-milled cogs, rotating with peristaltic machine grace, ribs forming arching pipes that hummed with harmonic frequencies, skulls serving as processing nodes with empty sockets, glowing amber like cogitator displays. The Boneforge moved with living architecture of death, breathing through calcium matrices while processing information through biological chemistry rather than blessed silicon, each joint articulating with wet sounds that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity and neural tissue. Environmental shift accelerated beyond atmospheric anomaly into theological impossibility. Temperature collapsed by measurable degrees, our breath forming visible fog that rhymed weapon barrels with delicate frost feathers, trembling to the ever-present 312 pulse. The formaline's sting beneath incense and tallow indicated embalmer's trace, chemical signature of mortuary work, while riveted plate half consumed by calcified growth bore vanished mortuary cohort designation. 312 personnel, missing from records that should contain no gaps. Each rivet had been replaced by erupting bone filaments, as if metal itself learned to bud calcium structures with deliberate intelligence. Mechanicus and religious terminology layered over impossible revelation as my team struggled to classify wrongness, transcending mere heresy. Lyris 5 identified ossified differential engine through spectral analysis, her mechadendrite tendrils sampling electromagnetic signatures suggesting neural activity in calcified structures dead for millennia, speaking Binharic prayer to the omniscire that received checksum perfect reply through marrow conduction. Sister Maelia called it false reliquary, requiring immediate consecration and burning, her scarred face tightening, while flamer pilot light flickered blue-white instead of orange, voice carrying blessed authority against corruption existing in spaces between sacred and profane. I designated the construction heretical until proven otherwise, invoking rosette authority that trembled before wrongness mocking classification. The forge extruded bone keys with jeweler's precision, carpals milled to exact tolerances exceeding imperial manufacturing standards, molars racked like data teeth for information storage, while phalanges clicked together in 312 rhythm. Spectral analysis revealed data encoded in hydroxyapatite crystal structure, mathematical progressions embedded within calcium matrices like digital genetics, numbers and prayers and pylon frequencies seeded grain by grain into living scripture. Binharic pulses in marrow channels aligned with persistent motif, creating sonic architecture existing in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry, while telemetry confirmed impossible readings. Neural conductivity in supposedly dead bone, electromagnetic resonance patterns matching cogitator processing cycles. Technical revelation emerged through recognition protocols that defied imperial understanding. The forge analyzed my rosette through signet field analysis, scanning blessed metals and sacred oils with precision exceeding most cogitators, then responded with bone filaments reaching toward me with deliberate intent, like pale whiskers tasting authority codes. Calcium structures understood and responded to sacred frequencies with accuracy that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with alarm, while theological implications crystallized. Saints' bones retained consciousness despite centuries of preservation, creating biological network processing devotional mathematics through organic chemistry rather than blessed silicon circuits. Military tension escalated as Theta Grey's targeting runes flickered, unable to resolve friend-foe status of living architecture registering simultaneously as sacred relic and unknown threat. Galvanic rifles hummed with blessed oils, while auspexes painted phantom contacts appearing and vanishing like heat mirages. Machine spirits murmuring litany fragments and weapon status reports too tense for comfort. Environmental pressure shifted as condensation ran red like thin blood from bone surfaces, humidity dropping, while frost whirls sketched helical patterns matching geometric arrangements throughout ossuary levels. Body horror manifested through violations of death's finality, transcending biological wrongness. Wall-mounted skulls pulsed with organic rhythm, empty sockets focusing on invisible targets, while my servo skull's optical array flickered without authorization. Bone components showing stress fractures forming patterns that hurt to contemplate directly. The engine leaned toward me with wrinkling of ribs, scenting familiar tincture through signet field resonance, while 3 bone filaments uncurled like curious tendrils, stroking voximeters on my gorget with static kiss felt in dental work. Present tense slipped through clinical recording discipline during sensory beat. Lattice grows toward my position with anatomical precision, forming sternum-shaped port matching earlier key spline, while vertebrae cogs rotate faster, skull nodes processing increased data flow through biological chemistry. The port gleamed with marrow sheen, edges stippled with nerve-like cilia waving in unfelt draft, opening like anatomical aperture designed for specific insertion, while something in my augmetic ulna thrummed recognizing dock configuration. Telemetry spikes erupted like solar flare from below, indicating heart awakening with massive computational processes, while 312 motif pulsed with increased intensity, accompanied by subsonic hum vibrating through palace foundations. My chronometer recorded exactly 312 seconds elapsed since entering heart antechamber, the number carrying significance, resonating in augmetic neural pathways, with frequency matching pressure hymn echoing from chambers where saints' bones sang mathematics. Vox howled with encrypted custodian codebreak, cutting through dimensional barrier. Shadowkeeper inbound. Hold fast. Do not engage the heart. The mechanized voice carried sacred frequencies that made bone structures pulse with sympathetic vibration, then translated through Knave's own marrow into naked command audible inside my teeth, while Auramite figure stepped from egress passage, black-plumed warrior, whose gold coal eyes fixed on sternum port, dilating like patient breath before speech. I confessed private terror masked by procedure as my augmetic ulna vibrated with increasing intensity, answering the bone forge in sympathetic rhythm that displaced natural heartbeat with steady 312 cadence. Metal responded to bone's call through frequencies bypassing conscious understanding, titanium steel resonating like tuning fork, struck by invisible mallet, while tremor traveled up my arm into clavicle, creating biological harmony between flesh and machine that mocked imperial understanding of augmetic integration. Bone filaments brushed my glove with curious intelligence, and I felt ghost pulse within them despite calcium structures containing no circulatory system. Withdrawal leaving palms slick with marrow-scented condensate that steamed in cold air, carrying undertones of embalmers' rooms and ancient death. Polarvey muttered through psychic resonance that everyone in chamber was being measured by unknown criteria, her scarred features contorting as blood vessels burst in milky eyes, whispering of anatomical assessment through frequencies that bypassed auditory processing to speak directly to primitive brain centers governing reverence and terror. The astropath described sensation of vast intelligence, cataloging bone density, marrow composition, neural conductivity through augmetic pathways, creating biological profile for purposes escaping conscious analysis, yet resonating where duty and fear intersected like crossed blades. Lyris 5 attempted controlled interface despite theological implications, unsheathing noospheric spikes from mechadendrite sheaths while speaking binharic prayer to the Omnissiah through augmetic vocal apparatus enhanced with sacred resonators. The Bone Forge offered handshake protocol keyed to specific genetic signature, displaying identifier in perfect machine cant that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with alarm. Voss Child 312. The designation carried authority transcending my rosette, accessing records that should not exist in any imperial archive, while calcium structures processed information through organic chemistry, with accuracy exceeding blessed cogitators. Present tense slipped through clinical recording discipline during sensory beat. My pulse synchronizes completely with 312 rhythm, biological and mechanical systems harmonizing through electromagnetic resonance patterns matching cogitator processing cycles. The bone forge breathes through calcium matrices in rhythm with my respiratory cycle. Cathedral cogitator learning my biological signature, while bone structures throughout chamber pulse with sympathetic vibration, creating network of responsive nodes, communicating through frequencies that made servo-skull optical arrays flicker without authorization. Sister Malia recited litany of severance in low Gothic, each line carrying blessed authority against wrongness, defying classification. But bone structures replied with Binharic chime in perfect harmony, creating sonic architecture existing in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry. Her flamer pilot light flickered blue-white instead of orange, while rosary beads adhered to stone surfaces as though walls possessed wet flesh beneath mineral facade, oil-slick residue stringing between blessed bone and living rock, while theological implications transcended mere corruption into active blasphemy requiring immediate consecration. Military preparation escalated as Theta Grey set shaped charges on load-bearing bones, despite Lyris V's warning that structure would not obey human physics when detonated. Galvanic rifles hummed with blessed oils while auspexes painted phantom contacts appearing and vanishing like heat mirages, targeting runes flickering unable to resolve friend-foe status of living architecture registering simultaneously as sacred relic and unknown threat. Environmental pressure shifted as condensation ran red like thin blood from bone surfaces, humidity dropping while frost whirls sketched helical patterns on weapon barrels trembling to persistent pulse. Body horror escalated through violations of death's finality, transcending biological wrongness. My glove, where filaments had kissed synth leather, flexed stiffly as dusting of white adhered like calcium, learning to calcify in sympathy. And when I flexed, fingers, fine grit, fell like snow, ringing against floor with sound too high to hear yet, too heavy to ignore. Wall segments thinned until polished adamantine facade dissolved like ice under thawing river, revealing underlying bone structure with marrow canals becoming visible like capillaries, pulsing with sickly yellow light from within calcium matrices. Telemetry spike erupted like solar flare from depths below heart antechamber, indicating massive awakening with computational processes exceeding palace cogitator arrays, while subsonic hum vibrated through foundations. My Vox channels crackled with interference, forming geometric patterns in audio spectrum before fragmenting. Terra Vox station receiving, astronomican variance, time window reduced. The transmission died as mechanized voice recited Emperor's Catechism backward. Violation of sacred liturgy that made wall-mounted skulls focus empty sockets on invisible targets. Light dimmed as Auramite figure stepped from egress passage. Black-plumed shadowkeeper with gold coal eyes, whose presence filled chamber with authority transcending my rosette. The warrior's ceramite-enhanced voice carried sacred frequencies that made bone structures pulse with sympathetic vibration, speaking judgment that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity. Tech interrogator, Kalen Voss. By your measures and your key, you have opened door that should never exist. His words carried weight of millennia, while sternum port dilated with anatomical precision, edges stippled with nerve-like cilia, waving in unfelt draft, opening like patient breath before speech as 3-1-2 rhythm faltered, then resumed with desperate intensity, the bone forge recognizing superior presence, yet refusing complete submission to authority older than its awakening. I recorded with reverence and resentment as the Shadowkeeper's presence filled chamber with authority transcending my rosette, his Auramite-enhanced voice carrying judgment that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity, while living rebuke and failing solace warred in my augmetic neural pathways. The custodian confirmed partial truth through revelations striking deeper than any physical threat. Ossuary cogitator seeded during unification wars as Malcador's silent abacus. Mortuary engine calculating empire's dead, and treachery risk through bone data analysis embedded in hydroxyapatite crystal structure. Mathematical progressions encoding loyalty coefficients and betrayal probabilities. Grain by grain, into living scripture, processed through organic chemistry, rather than blessed silicon circuits. The construct should remain dormant with rights forgotten and power sources depleted, but Astronomican's waveform shifted subtly through phase slip that choir compensated on surface levels, triggering Bone's awakening response through harmonic frequencies, matching 312 motif resonating in calcium matrices, like digital genetics, encoding corruption into Saint's remains. Counter-psalm composition threatened silence wedge in, beacons spreading like frost through psychic networks, creating null pocket in Emperor's light that invited warp intrusion while simultaneously crushing manifestation attempts through paradoxical field generation. Time limit crystallized with bureaucratic precision as Shadowkeeper's flat verdict voice carried sacred frequencies. 6 hours before irreversible cascade failure spread through palace foundations, destabilizing Astronomican from within holy terror through interference pattern that would plunge the Imperium into navigational darkness, transcending mere heresy into existential annihilation. Telemetry confirmed rolling blackouts spreading through choir cells above our coordinate, as counter-psalm created expanding null zone in psychic emanations, each darkened cell registering on my chronometer with 312 cadence marking countdown to theological catastrophe. Military and religious friction erupted as Sister Malia argued for immediate consecration and burning, her scarred face tightening, while flamer pilot light flickered blue-white instead of orange, voice carrying blessed authority against wrongness, existing in spaces between sacred and profane, where imperial doctrine offered no guidance. Lyris 5 advocated harmonic tuning solution through controlled interface with new spheric spikes, speaking Binharic prayer to the Omnissiah that received checksum perfect reply through marrow conduction, creating theological crisis as sacred machine language found understanding in supposedly dead bone structures, processing devotional mathematics, with accuracy mocking imperial understanding of consciousness and death. Theta Grey maintained defensive perimeter with galvanic rifles tracking phantom contacts, targeting runes flickering unable to resolve friend-foe status of living architecture, registering simultaneously as sacred relic, an unknown threat, while machine spirits murmured litany fragments too tense for comfort. Orders came with Auramite authority, older than my bloodline. Accompany Shadowkeeper to heart through passages only my marrow pattern could open through genetic resonance encoded in biological locks, requiring specific calcium signature. The revelation struck with theological implications transcending mere identification as Custodian's gold coal eyes, fixed on my augmetic ulna, vibrating in sympathetic harmony with bone structures throughout chamber. Malcador seeded construct with genetic keys drawn from Terran bloodlines, predating imperial records, creating biological security system, recognizing descendants through bone chemistry analysis, rather than augmetic verification or rosette authority, making me living key to chambers that should never exist beneath holy terror, while 312 rhythm synchronized completely with my pulse, biological and mechanical systems harmonizing through electromagnetic resonance patterns. Environmental wrongness escalated beyond atmospheric anomaly as temperature collapsed further despite geothermal systems. Our breath-forming ice crystals that tinkled like wind chimes striking calcium surfaces, while humidity condensed as frost on weapon barrels and exposed skin. Formalin sting beneath incense and tallow intensified, chemical signature of mortuary work mixed with void and ancient fear, while ash drizzled from unlit thuribles. Powdered bone creating precipitation tasting of copper and forgotten prayers when inhaled through compromised filtration systems. Present tense slipped through clinical recording discipline during sensory beat. Boneforge opens throat of bone stairs descending deeper into palace foundations. Vertebrae steps flexing like living cartilage while calcium matrices pulse with organic rhythm matching my biological signature. Passage dilating with anatomical precision as edges stippled with nerve-like cilia wave in unfelt draft. Body horror manifested through violations of death's finality as we began descent into heart chamber. servo skull drifting forward like obedient cherub with cracked halo, while Lyris 5 braided sanctified copper into my sleeve cuff. Chrome finger resting at pulse that was not mine anymore. Environmental pressure shifted as condensation ran red like thin blood from bone surfaces, air growing thick with scent of iron and formaldehyde traces, while wall-mounted skulls focused empty sockets on auramite figure, processing threat assessment through biological chemistry that recognized superior authority yet refused complete submission to power older than awakening. Technical revelation emerged through spectral analysis as massive computational processes awakened in depths below, neural conductivity in supposedly dead bone exceeding cogitator processing cycles, while mathematical progressions created biological network processing treachery calculations through organic chemistry, with accuracy transcending loyalty, coefficients into prophetic mathematics, encoding 10 millennia of accumulated betrayal. The stairs lurched violently without warning as lattice grew barbs with deliberate intelligence, attempting to ensnare auramite armor in shower of sparks, while gold scraped against bone with metallic shriek-filling chamber. Custodian tore free through superior strength, leaving ceramite scored and scarred by calcium structures, learning to grip with predatory hunger as Malia burned grasping filaments with promethium, smoke reeking of charred marrow and ancient death, while 312 rhythm faltered, then resumed with desperate intensity. Boneforge recognizing threat yet driven by programming older than fear to complete its mortuary calculations through whatever means necessary. My tone tightened while cadence slipped to present during crisis beats as the custodian tore free through superior strength, auramite armor scraped and scored by calcium structures learning to grip with predatory hunger, leaving gold fragments embedded in bone barbs that pulsed with organic rhythm synchronized to 312 cadence. Malia burned grasping filaments with promethium, blessed flame-consuming calcium growths that screamed in frequencies bypassing auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity, smoke reeking of charred marrow and ancient death, while chemical signature mixed formaldehyde, traces with void and forgotten prayers. Environmental hazards escalated beyond atmospheric anomaly as we descended into thickening cold, temperature collapsing by measurable degrees despite geothermal systems maintaining palace foundation warmth for 10 millennia, our breath forming ice crystals that tinkled like wind chimes, striking calcium surfaces, while humidity condensed as frost on weapon barrels and exposed skin. Polave convulsed with psychic feedback as milky eyes rolled back in scarred skull, blood vessels bursting while she whispered of marrow dreams bleeding into waking consciousness through frequencies that made primitive brain centers spike with reverence and terror. The impossible occurred on Holy Terror. Astronomicon cut completely for full minute above our coordinate, eternal heartbeat of the Imperium vanishing into black delta of silence that scraped raw as wire, leaving theological wound where Emperor's light should burn eternal. My chronometer recorded exact duration, while implications crystallized, micro-incursion attempting manifestation through silence gap created by counterpsalm, spreading like frost through psychic networks, rolling blackout, consuming choir cells with 312 progression marking, countdown to navigational catastrophe. Shadows tried forming from null pocket in Emperor's light, warp entities seeking purchase through darkness that should not exist within palace wards, blessed by 10 millennia of constant prayer and devotion. Manifestation attempts ballooned like rotten breath, slick half-forms, heuristic smears, limbs without joints and mouths where no law permits them, rising to man's height before unraveling under sacred architecture older than imperial doctrine. Palace foundations crushed incursion through paradoxical field generation, while Boneforge exuded null field that both invited warp intrusion and simultaneously destroyed whatever answered the call, creating theological paradox that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with alarm as living ossuary processed corruption through biological chemistry with accuracy exceeding blessed cogitators. Comms fragmented through dimensional barrier as vox channels crackled with interference, forming geometric patterns in audio spectrum. Choir, cells, black, chant inversion detected, do not. The transmission died as mechanized voice recited Emperor's Catechism backward, violation of sacred liturgy that made wall-mounted skulls focus empty sockets on invisible targets, while bone structures throughout passage pulsed with sympathetic vibration. Present tense dominated sensory processing. World misbehaves in silence pocket. Lumen halos sharpen to razors while shadows tug away from owners and stand like men for half-breath before unraveling to soot under buried wards. Military decision point crystallized with bureaucratic precision as tactical options narrowed to binary choice requiring immediate resolution. Blowthroat passage now and seal anomaly within palace foundations, accepting structural damage to prevent cascade failure, or push deeper to heart chamber for counter-SARM retuning through controlled interface, despite escalating environmental hazards and unknown biological contamination. I invoked Rosette Authority to continue descent, citing Ordnance 112 Alpha for emergency vault custodianship, while Shadowkeeper nodded once, acceptance or indictment unclear through Auramite Helm's emotionless facade, his ceramite-enhanced voice carrying sacred frequencies that made calcium structures pulse with organic rhythm. Environmental wrongness escalated as corridor dimensions fluctuated on Auspex readings, adding and subtracting meters before locking at values, violating architectural surveys conducted monthly for millennia. Floorstones rippled beneath our boots like organic membrane responding to footstep pressure, while condensation ran red like thin blood from stone pores, air growing thick with scent of iron and ancient death mixed with mortuary traces transcending preservation techniques. 2 Skitarii from Theta Grey fell to closing bone traps, calcium structures snapping shut with wet sounds around legs and torso, then rose with bone-locked limbs, moving in 3-1-2 rhythm despite severed neural pathways and compromised augmetic systems. Malia ended their suffering with prayer and bolt rounds, blessed ceramite shattering corrupted bone while reciting litany of final rest, her scarred face tightening with recognition that death itself had been compromised within anomaly zone. Lyris 5 lost lower body to rib trap closing with guillotine precision, chrome blood mixing with marrow-scented condensate, while her augmetic vocal apparatus continued chanting anti-corrosion, Binharic cant, through damaged speakers crackling with static. I dragged her until she ordered abandonment with liturgical voice, carrying blessed authority, chrome fingers releasing grip on my sleeve while speaking benediction for necessary betrayal. From dust to duty, interrogator, complete the work. Her mechadendrite tendrils went limp as vital signs flatlined, blessed machine spirit departing flesh through sacred frequencies, while calcium structures absorbed chrome components with deliberate intelligence, learning from Mechanicus augmetics with theological implications transcending mere heresy. At bottom, sternum door dilated to our presence, then sealed behind last survivor with wet sound, massive archway of fused bone pulsing with organic rhythm, while edges stippled with nerve-like cilia waved in unfelt draft. The portal closed like anatomical aperture, revealing chamber beyond shrouded in darkness our luminators could not penetrate, while 3-1-2 rhythm synchronized completely with my pulse, biological and mechanical systems harmonizing through electromagnetic resonance. Vox died completely. Naked silence surrounded us, isolated from all outside contact, cut off from Imperium and Emperor's light, while my chronometer recorded final telemetry. We were sealed inside Heart's husk, where saints' bones sang mathematics, and death dreamed of resurrection through frequencies older than fear. I catalogued Heart Chamber with awe-struck detail, maintaining clinical recording discipline, witnessing architecture that violated every principle of imperial engineering, while corridors shaped like arteries pulsed with peristaltic motion, calcium walls flexing in organic rhythm that resonated through my augmetic ulna with 3-1-2 cadence. Nodes resembling ganglia processed information through biological chemistry with accuracy exceeding blessed cogitators. while spines of teeth functioned as cogwheels in vast biological machine, each molar rotating with wet sounds that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity, creating sonic architecture existing in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry, where pressure and temperature pulses transmitted meaning through marrow conduction rather than atmospheric vibration. Military discipline maintained formation through impossible topology as Theta Grey survivors established overlapping field coverage, galvanic rifles tracking phantom contacts while auspexes painted friend-foe unknown markers on empty air, machine spirits murmuring litany fragments too tense for comfort. Religious optics overlaid through Sister Mylia's scarred perception as she witnessed cathedral parody in rib arches and bone buttresses, architecture combining sacred and profane elements into theological paradox, requiring immediate consecration yet defying classification under imperial doctrine. Her flamer pilot light flickered blue-white instead of orange, while rosary beads adhered to wall surfaces as though stone possessed wet flesh beneath mineral facade, oil-slick residue stringing between blessed bone and living rock. Present tense slipped through recording discipline during sensory beat. Noise isn't sound, but pressure modulation, beating against exposed skin until my breath learns the rhythm, despite conscious resistance. Environmental wrongness escalated as humidity condensed, forming helical frost patterns matching geometric arrangements throughout ossuary levels, while temperature dropped despite geothermal systems, our exhalation becoming visible fog carrying scent of ancient tallow mixed with formaldehyde traces, indicating mortuary origins, transcending preservation techniques designed to maintain structural integrity for millennia. Technical revelation emerged through Lyris 5's final spectral analysis, transmitted via data shard embedded in my gorget port, pressure hymn mapping to symbols aligning with ancient Golden Throne pylon schematics encoded in pre-heresy archives. The recurring motif reframed through theological implications. 312 wasn't number sequence, but retuning order for throne pylon resonance frequencies. Harmonic progression designed to calibrate Emperor's psychic emanations through mathematical precision rather than devotional fervor alone. Calcium structures processed loyalty coefficients and betrayal probabilities through biological chemistry, creating mortuary engine calculating empires dead with prophetic accuracy, while bone data analysis encoded treachery risk into saints' remains through hydroxyapatite crystal structure functioning as organic cogitators. Body horror manifested through violations of death's finality, as walls showed prayer-court faces, not animate, but captured mid-devotion like photographic negatives burned into calcium substrate during moments of supreme spiritual ecstasy. Saints' catalogue carved into living bone revealed names and deeds etched through marrow channels, each entry pulsing with organic rhythm, while empty sockets focused on invisible targets, processing threat assessment through neural networks that should not exist in preserved relics. Polave whispered names as if remembering black ship comrades from suppressed memories, her psychic senses detecting awareness in mineral structures carrying consciousness despite centuries of supposed death. Clue revelation struck with theological implications as truth crystallized through environmental analysis. Malcador's silent abacus meant to siphon devotions, strengthening throne calibrations, through harmonic resonance, converting prayers into mathematical precision, enhancing Emperor's psychic emanations across the galaxy, but something inverted the flow through phase slip compensation, reversing sacred energy direction until devotional mathematics became prophetic calculations encoding 10 millennia of accumulated betrayal. Lyris 5's confession carried weight of millennia through her dying Binharic transmission. She had seeded diagnostic code during previous audit, harmless routine maintenance that gave Boneforge operational grammar, teaching calcium structures to process sacred machine language through organic chemistry with accuracy mocking imperial understanding of consciousness and death. Environmental pressure shifted as air grew thick with sense of immense power being wielded by machine built from dead saints, subsonic hum intensifying until my chronometer recorded Astronomican's return, faint but dissonant, harmony subtly altered like songs sung in different key. The central chamber, shaped like colossal sternum, pulsed with imperceptible rhythm. Vast organic engine of bone and light processing devotional input through biological networks with computational power exceeding palace cogitator arrays, while theological implications transcended mere corruption into prophetic mathematics. Present tense dominated during climactic revelation. Heart sings once powerfully, resonant frequency, making air shimmer, while Saint's skull opens like flower with anatomical precision. Cranial plates unfolding to reveal spool of teeth etched with pre-heresy sigils, glowing amber like cogitator displays. Each tooth bore different inscription in languages, predating human speech, yet carrying meaning. Bypassing conscious understanding to speak directly to primitive brain centers, governing reverence and terror. Mathematical progressions, creating biological handshake protocols, recognizing genetic signatures through marrow analysis rather than augmetic verification. The spool clicked once with sound felt in my molars, before beginning to turn with mechanical precision, revealing Sigillite's personal mark, stamped into enamel, with authority transcending my rosette, while Saint's rib at my belt vibrated, recognizing dot configuration as sternum-shaped keyway opened in altar's surface, dark, anatomical aperture forming from living rock where Saint's bones sang mathematics and death dreamed of resurrection through frequencies older than fear, the number 312 carrying significance resonating in augmetic neural pathways as genetic lexi missing from incomplete key. I recorded confession shorn of drama maintaining clinical discipline while truth crystallized with bureaucratic precision. Tuning Boneforge required human marrow key through genetic verification, transcending Rosette authority, blood necessary for biological handshake protocols, recognizing Terran bloodlines predating Imperial records. Military preparation proceeded with ritual precision, as Shadowkeeper locked perimeter with Auramite authority, Ceramite-enhanced movements creating defensive barrier, while Theta Grey survivors angled galvanic rifles in hedgehog formation, machine spirits humming 3-1-2 cadence through blessed oils. Sister Mylia bound my forearm with relic ribbon cut from martyred hospitaler's shroud, scarred fingers gentle despite urgency while she kissed iron to bone through synth leather, reciting prayer of necessary suffering in low Gothic, carrying blessed authority against wrongness, defying classification, her voice theological weight, while flamer pilot light flickered blue-white instead of orange. Mechanicus and religious fusion manifested through Lyris V's final contribution, transmitted via data shard, embedded in my Gorget port, programming diagnostic protocols with liturgical syntax, combining sacred code and machine language into theological paradox. Her spectral analysis revealed pressure hymn as mathematical progression, encoding information in calcium matrices, functioning as biological cogitators, processing devotional mathematics through organic chemistry, with accuracy transcending blessed silicon circuits, while my augmetic ulna vibrated sympathetically with bone structures throughout chamber. Titanium. Steel resonating like tuning forks struck by invisible mallet, creating biological harmony between flesh and machine that mocked imperial understanding of augmetic integration. Body horror reached focal point as I offered augmetic ulna for biological sampling. Sterile blade extruding from skull altar, biting through metal and preserved flesh with surgical precision, while bone exposed gleamed white beneath illuminator beams. The keyway accepted my ulna with wet sound, microscopic channels drinking marrow through capillary action, while calcium structures analyzed genetic signature with accuracy exceeding palace cogitator arrays. Present tense dominated sensory processing. Pain strikes like frostfire burning through nervous system. White and clean sheet pulled across perception, while world answers in mathematics. 3-1-2 rhythm replacing natural heartbeat, until distinction fails between biological and mechanical systems, harmonizing through electromagnetic resonance patterns. Environmental pressure shifted as room tilted with cosmological glimpse, revealing Astronomicon perceived not as light, but wound held open by will. Psychic emanation bleeding through reality's fabric, where Emperor's consciousness maintained eternal vigil against encroaching darkness. Local temperature collapsed to -12°C, micro-ice forming on exhaled breath while chamber breathed through calcium matrices. Cathedral cogitator processing biological data as spool of teeth turned with mechanical precision. Children sang catechism, untaught for 10 millennia, voices carrying through marrow conduction rather than atmospheric vibration, hymns encoding loyalty coefficients and betrayal probabilities into living scripture processed through biological networks with computational power exceeding blessed cogitators. Technical revelation emerged through interface sequence as skull alter accepted diagnostic shard through anatomical aperture, cranial plates unfolding like flower petals, while amber light emanated from empty sockets processing information with theological implications. Bone guardians extruded from walls like white hounds responding to biological intrusion, calcium structures learning predatory behavior, while Shadowkeeper carved through ossified attackers with auramite blade, gold flaring with oathfire as pale dogs shuddered under sacred gaze. Environmental hazards manifested as pressure hymn flipped polarity, subsonic frequencies inverting harmonic progression until devotional mathematics became prophetic calculations, encoding treachery risk through biological chemistry. The interface displayed error message bypassing auditory processing to resonate directly in augmetic neural pathways with authority transcending conscious understanding. Key incomplete. Genetic lexeme missing. Saint's rib at my belt fractured open with sound like breaking glass, revealing second spool stamped with sigillite's personal sigil, glowing with power older than imperial doctrine. Mathematical progressions etched in enamel carried meaning beyond rosette authority, while theological implications crystallized. Malcador's silent abacus processed genetic signatures through calcium structures, recognizing descendant bloodlines through bone chemistry rather than augmetic verification. Mortuary engine requiring complete genetic key drawn from Terran families predating unification wars. Military countdown reached critical threshold as Emperor's radiance flooded chamber with incandescent divine light. Glorious and terrible illumination, flattening shadows against walls, while void hissed retreat from sacred emanation. Polar vase sockets wept milk-white tears as psychic feedback spiked beyond conscious processing, blood vessels bursting while she whispered of marrow dreams bleeding into waking consciousness. 2 minutes remained before hymn locked into either silence wedge or true harmony restoration. Binary choice requiring immediate resolution through complete biological interface, using both genetic lexemes encoded in my marrow and sigillite's secondary spool. I spoke missing lexeme not as code, but prayer in old High Terran from childhood memories. From dust to duty. The phrase triggered partial biological handshake as calcium structures recognized incomplete genetic signature, but second spool demanded insertion, while bone guardians dragged teeth along floor in hungry applause, the altar holding me with lover's cruelty, as saints proved stubborn and dead calculus never forgave missing terms. Malcador's failsafe requiring dual authentication through bloodline and authority. Living key and ancient seal united where saints' bones sang mathematics, and death dreamed of resurrection. I maintained steady recording cadence like scribe at execution, while Lyris 5 spliced sigillite spool into system through final diagnostic protocols, her chrome fingers dancing across biological interface as Skull Alter accepted dual authentication through genetic lexeme and pre-heresy seal. Cranial plates unfolding like flower petals around ancient authority, while amber light pulsed from empty sockets processing information with computational power exceeding palace cogitator arrays. The ritual began with multiple elements harmonizing in theological paradox that transcended imperial understanding of consciousness and death. Sister Malia intoned Canticle of Thorns in Low Gothic, each phrase carrying blessed authority against corruption, while her scarred voice rose above pressure hymn. Flamer pilot light, blazing blue-white instead of orange as promethium. blessed by Cardinal Vex, answered sacred frequencies with cleansing fire that made bone guardians hiss and retreat into wall alcoves like pale serpents seeking darkness. Lyris 5 overlaid countercode in machine language through augmetic vocal apparatus, enhanced with sacred resonators, Binharik cant warbling with funeral undertones, while her final transmission wove through liturgical syntax, creating biological network processing devotional mathematics through organic chemistry, with accuracy mocking blessed silicon circuits. The Shadowkeeper held back bone, guardians extruding like white hounds from calcium walls, auramite blade carving through ossified attackers with oathfire flaring gold against pale flesh. Ceramite-enhanced movements creating defensive barrier, while galvanic rifles from Theta Grey survivors burn through ring of defensive teeth chattering in 3-1-2 rhythm like hungry applause. Machine spirits screaming overload warnings as electromagnetic signatures exceeded measurement parameters. Mixed lexicon crescendoed as Binharik frequencies, harmonized with relic incenses, flaring from thuribles, mathematical progressions, combining with devotional fervor, while auspexes painted phantom contacts, appearing and vanishing like heat mirages, targeting runes flickering unable to resolve friend-foe status of living architecture, registering simultaneously as sacred relic and unknown threat. Sensory beats snapped short with military precision. Auramite claw scraped against bone, producing shower of sparks that rang like bells in frequencies bypassing auditory processing. Frostbite exposed skin despite geothermal systems as local temperature collapsed to -14°C. Pressure him flipped polarity, creating sonic architecture existing in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry, where devotional mathematics became prophetic calculations, encoding 10 millennia of accumulated betrayal. Present tense dominated during climactic moment. Emperor's radiance floods chamber with incandescent divine light, glorious and terrible illumination that flattens shadows against walls while void hisses retreat from sacred emanation. Warp entities crushed by paradoxical field generation as polar vase sockets weep milk-white tears, psychic feedback spiking beyond conscious processing, while blood vessels burst in scarred features, her astropathic senses detecting awareness in mineral structures, carrying consciousness despite centuries of supposed death. Military countdown reached final threshold as 2 minutes remained before him locked into either silence wedge, spreading like frost through psychic networks, or true harmony restoration, calibrating Emperor's psychic emanations across the galaxy. Binary choice requiring immediate resolution through complete biological interface, using genetic signature encoded in my marrow and Sigillite's ancient authority, combined in dual authentication protocol. I spoke missing lexeme with theological weight, not code, but prayer in old High Terran carrying childhood memories that predated augmetics and imperial service. From dust to duty. The phrase triggered complete biological handshake as calcium structures recognized genetic signature through marrow analysis, skull altar accepting dual verification, while bone guardians dragged teeth along floor in applause, that made my augmetic ulna vibrate sympathetically, with increasing intensity, 3-1-2 rhythm synchronizing completely with my pulse, until distinction between biological and mechanical systems became meaningless. Environmental chaos erupted as Boneforge convulsed violently, cathedral cogitator processing competing commands, while vertebrae cogs ground against each other with metallic shriek-filling chamber, skull nodes flickering between amber and crimson as biological networks struggled to reconcile devotional mathematics with prophetic calculations. Counter-psalm buckling under competing frequencies before stabilizing as harmonic progression found its native track with shudder that left incense soot falling like black snow from ceiling, while telemetry spiked beyond measurement capacity. Present tense slipped through recording discipline. Astronomican's hum slams back deafeningly through palace foundations, eternal heartbeat of the Imperium restored with thunderous power that makes chamber walls pulse in sympathetic vibration. But riding that restored psychic emanation comes echo answering not from terror's surface, but from somewhere deep within chamber bones and within my own marrow, where genetic lexeme resonates with frequencies older than fear, biological handshake creating permanent connection between living key and mortuary engine, as Boneforge learned my marrow pattern during interface, calcium structures analyzing genetic signature, with accuracy exceeding blessed cogitators, while theological implications crystallized into horrifying truth that dual authentication had succeeded too completely, restoring Astronomican's harmony while seeding 312 pattern into my very bones, where it would pulse with each heartbeat, carrying silent wedge of dangerous knowledge away from heart chamber like living repository of mortuary mathematics, encoded in flesh and titanium, making me both savior and vector for corruption, that sang in frequencies bypassing conscious understanding, to resonate directly in augmetic neural pathways, with meaning that transcended loyalty coefficients into prophetic calculations, where saints' bones had learned to dream of resurrection through biological chemistry, processing devotion and betrayal into living scripture written in marrow and metal. I described Climax's second crest with stripped ritual calm, while truth crystallized with bureaucratic precision. Boneforge learned my marrow pattern through biological interface, refusing full silence wedge release unless keeping copy inside me as living repository of dangerous knowledge encoded in calcium matrices, processing devotional mathematics through organic chemistry. Choices narrowed to binary resolution requiring immediate decision. Collapse Boneforge risking structural damage under palace foundations, or bind silence into one vessel removing me from heart permanently, while seeding 312 pattern into my very bones, where it would pulse with each heartbeat, carrying mortuary calculations wherever duty demanded. The Shadowkeeper suggested latter, with flat verdict voice, carrying auramite authority, ceramite-enhanced words bypassing auditory processing to resonate, directly in chest cavity. Carry pattern away, seal what we left beneath, you will be the ward. Military execution proceeded with ritual precision, as melter charges planted at vertebrae junction points, where calcium cogs bore greatest structural load, each explosive blessed by Sister Malia with sacred oil, while she recited litany of severance, her scarred fingers marking shape charges with theological authority, against wrongness defying classification. Lyris 5's final transmission reprogrammed detonation sequence to fail closed, preventing cascade damage through palace foundations. Binharik Kant encoding structural analysis through data shard embedded in my gorget port, while her chrome voice carried funeral steadiness despite compromised vocal apparatus. Theta Grey maintained defensive perimeter, with galvanic rifles tracking bone guardians extruding from walls like pale serpents, targeting runes flickering unable to resolve friend-foe status of living architecture, registering simultaneously as sacred relic and unknown threat. Body horror culminated as bone filaments slid under my skin with surgical precision, calcium structures tracing 312 pattern along veins, while microscopic channels analyzed genetic signature through marrow chemistry, biological handshake, creating permanent connection between living key and mortuary engine. I did not scream, accepting necessary sacrifice with theological weight, while pain struck like frostfire burning through nervous system, world answering in mathematics, as distinction between flesh and machine became meaningless, through electromagnetic resonance patterns, harmonizing biological and mechanical systems into unified network. Present tense slipped through recording discipline, wedge nests in my bones as if they were hollowed in anticipation, and when it seats, something clicks in my jaw felt in enamel and oath. Emperor's silence, revealing itself not as absence, but deliberate quiet, like held breath before speaking. Telemetry countdown reached critical threshold as 9 minutes remained to detonation, pressure rising exponentially, while environmental hazards escalated beyond atmospheric anomaly into cosmological revelation. I felt divine consciousness maintaining eternal vigil against encroaching darkness, wound held open by will, transcending mortal understanding, while Astronomican's restored harmony carried subtle dissonance, like songs sung in different key, harmonic progression altered by biological interface, creating permanent resonance between living repository and mortuary mathematics. The Shadowkeeper moved with Auramite authority, gold coal eyes fixed on bone guardians, learning predatory behavior, ceramite-enhanced movements creating defensive barrier, while his final words carried sacred frequencies. Go! I will hold them and force detonation if timers fail their courage. Environmental chaos erupted as Boneforge convulsed violently, Cathedral Cogitator processing competing commands, while vertebrae cogs ground against each other with metallic shriek-filling chamber, skull nodes flickering between amber and crimson as biological networks struggled to reconcile devotional calculations with structural collapse. Counter-psalm buckled under competing frequencies before stabilizing as harmonic progression found native track with shudder that left incense soot falling like black snow from ceiling, while telemetry spiked beyond measurement capacity. My chronometer recording impossible readings suggesting architectural dissolution rather than mere mechanical failure. We sprinted through arterial corridors as Boneforge screamed in voices like billion morticians, calcium structures convulsing with biological agony, while melter charges began cooking with increasing heat signatures, painting thermal bloom across Auspex displays. Bone Guardians pursued with inhuman hunger, teeth chattering in 3-1-2 rhythm like applause, while chamber walls pulsed in sympathetic vibration, sound bypassing auditory processing, to resonate directly in chest cavity, creating sonic architecture existing in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry. Environmental pressure shifted as corridors collapsed in avalanches of white shards, tooth wheels spinning like saws, while frost turned stone slick as glass, creating treacherous footing for retreat through impossible topology. Behind us, the Shadowkeeper carved through ossified attackers with Auramite blade, oathfire flaring gold against pale flesh, while he held final perimeter against guardians dragging teeth along floor in hungry pursuit. His ceramite-enhanced figure stood inside press of bone and light, taller than what tried to unmake him, quieter than its noise, raising blade in salute, meant for no one who would ever write it down before sinking into guardians like star into dawn, while charges began final countdown sequence. Palace foundations trembling as mortuary engine prepared for dormancy through controlled demolition rather than cascade failure threatening astronomican stability. The 3-1-2 pattern pulsed in my augmetic ulna with desperate intensity, guiding me through labyrinthine passages, while wedge hammered my bones in rhythm older than fear, making me eternal ward against dangerous knowledge encoded in flesh and titanium through biological interface transcending rosette authority into theological paradox, where duty and corruption harmonized in frequencies that would echo with each heartbeat, carrying silence away from heart chamber, where saints' bones had learned to dream of resurrection through prophetic mathematics mocking imperial understanding of loyalty and betrayal. I maintained hollow command cadence through exfiltration gauntlet, while bone corridors collapsed in avalanches of white shards, converting panic to procedure through military discipline, as calcium structures convulsed with biological agony, tooth wheels spinning like saws, cutting through air with metallic shriek that bypassed, auditory processing to resonate directly in chest cavity. Environmental chaos escalated beyond atmospheric anomaly into architectural dissolution as passages narrowed then widened with peristaltic motion, walls breathing in 3-1-2 rhythm, matching the wedge pulsing in my augmetic ulna, with desperate intensity, while frost turned stone slick as glass, creating treacherous footing for retreat through impossible topology where geometry obeyed organic rather than imperial engineering principles. Military terminology dominated my recording discipline as we executed bounding retreats through collapsing ossuary, casualty codes marking fallen, while Theta Grey survivors maintained overlapping field coverage, despite galvanic rifles tracking phantom contacts appearing and vanishing like heat mirages, their machine spirits screaming overload warnings as electromagnetic signatures exceeded measurement parameters. 2 Scutari fell to closing rib traps with guillotine precision, calcium structures wrapping around limbs with predatory hunger, then rose with bone-locked legs moving in unnatural rhythm, despite severed neural pathways and compromised augmetic systems. Sister Malia ended their suffering with prayer and bolt round, blessed ceramite shattering corrupted bone, while she recited litany of final rest, her scarred face carved with grim determination, as flamer-pilot light blazed blue-white instead of orange. Promethium blessed by Cardinal Vex, answering sacred frequencies with cleansing fire that consumed calcium growths, screaming in voices like billion morticians. Present tense slipped through recording discipline during structural collapse. World pulses with detonation shockwave traveling through palace foundations as melter charges achieve critical temperature in vertebrae junction points. Shaped explosives severing load-bearing bones with surgical precision, while Boneforge convulsed violently. Cathedral cogitator processing final calculations through biological networks before systems shut down created blessed silence, where persistent rhythm finally ceased. Lyris 5's chrome blood mixed with marrow-scented condensate as closing bone trap claimed her lower body. Augmetic vocal apparatus continuing anti-corrosion binharic cant through damaged speakers crackling with static until she ordered abandonment with liturgical voice carrying blessed authority. Chrome fingers releasing grip on my sleeve while speaking benediction for necessary betrayal. From dust to duty, interrogator. Complete the work. Her mechadendrite tendrils went limp as vital signs flatlined, blessed machine spirit departing flesh through sacred frequencies, while calcium structures absorbed chrome components with deliberate intelligence, learning from Mechanicus Augmetics, with theological implications transcending mere corruption. Environmental pressure shifted as ash became snow, falling from ceiling in geometric patterns, matching helical arrangements throughout ossuary levels, while heat returned as pressure waves chased us through collapsing architecture, temperature oscillating between frost and furnace with each breath creating visible fog that rhymed weapon barrels with delicate ice feathers, trembling to subsonic frequencies. Bone guardians pursued with inhuman hunger, teeth chattering in applause while chamber walls pulsed in sympathetic vibration, sound creating sonic architecture existing in dimensions beyond normal space-time geometry, where devotional mathematics had become prophetic calculations, encoding treachery risk through organic chemistry, with accuracy mocking imperial understanding of consciousness and death. We breached first reliquary hall through adamantine breach as explosions erupted in sequence behind us, bursting into chamber filled with dust and bone, raining like penitent's ashes from ceiling, while worlds shimmered with heat distortion from controlled demolition, rather than cascade failure, threatening astronomical stability. Telemetry and communications reacquired surface signals through dimensional barrier, as Vox channels crackled with bureaucratic relief. Choir stabilizing, astronomical variance normalized, threat contained. The transmission carried sacred frequencies that made my augmetic neural pathways spike with recognition, while implications crystallized. Eternal heartbeat of the Imperium restored through necessary sacrifice. Silence wedge, sealed within living repository, encoded in flesh and titanium, through biological interface creating permanent ward against corruption. In rubble light filtering through collapsed passages, inquisitorial sigils flared with authority transcending my rosette, as conclave gathered with parchment writs and hot irons for immediate interrogation. Interrogator Lord, bearing storm-black carapace, stood with scarred features, carved by decades hunting heresy, while acolytes maintained defensive perimeter, with storm bolters tracking movement signatures, their presence filling chamber with theological weight that made primitive brain centers spike with reverence and terror. The assembled inquisitors demanded containment confirmation, with flat verdict voices, carrying blessed authority against wrongness, defying classification, their questions sharp as scalpels, cutting through chaos, while I felt 312 echo in pulse before answering with clinical precision of recording instrument. The Shadowkeeper did not emerge from depths where Auramite figure had made final stand against Bone Guardians, learning predatory behavior, gold flaring with oathfire before silence claimed palace foundations, where Saints' bones had learned to dream of resurrection through mortuary mathematics older than fear. His final voxed order played delayed through static, mechanized voice carrying sacred frequencies. Carry pattern away. Seal what we left beneath. You will be the ward. The words slotted home behind my sternum like anatomical key, while everything in my augmetic neural pathways rang, once with clean note of bell struck in winter nave. Biological and mechanical systems harmonizing through electromagnetic resonance patterns that made me both savior and vector for dangerous knowledge pulsing with each heartbeat, carrying prophetic calculations away from heart chamber, where death had dreamed its final resurrection through frequencies bypassing conscious understanding to resonate directly in marrow and metal. I filed this classified mission report with fatalistic precision, the narrative testimony you have heard recorded through clinical discipline while maintaining bureaucratic calm that masked theological implications, transcending mere heresy into existential threat requiring permanent containment. Coordinates marked for interdiction with wax stylus bearing rosette authority, writing Centurion's seal barring access through containment order 13 Ossa, parchment stamped with blessed oils, while 312 pattern pulsed in my augmetic ulna like countdown to judgment, biological and mechanical systems harmonizing through electromagnetic resonance patterns that made distinction between flesh and machine meaningless through interface, transcending imperial understanding of consciousness and death. Cost tallied with military precision across multiple theaters of loss. Theta Grey maniple expended through necessary sacrifice. 2 Skitari consumed by bone traps, learning predatory behavior, while galvanic rifles blessed with sacred oils fell silent in calcium embrace. Machine spirits departing through frequencies older than fear, as melter charges claimed ossified architecture processing devotional mathematics through organic chemistry. Sister Superior Maelia missing, presumed entombed within collapsed ossuary where saints' bones sang mathematics. Her scarred features last seen reciting litany of final rest, while flamer pilot light blazed blue-white against corruption, defying classification. Prometheum blessed by Cardinal Vex, consuming calcium growths, screaming in voices like billion morticians before structural collapse claimed theological warrior whose devotion transcended Rosette authority. Lyris 5 stabilized in coffin of Auspex wires within Mechanicus Medicare facility, chrome blood mixing with marrow-scented condensate as mechadendrite tendrils went limp, blessed machine spirit departing flesh through sacred frequencies, while calcium structures absorbed augmetic components with deliberate intelligence. Custodian dead or living under palace foundations, name swallowed by duty as Auramite figure made final stand against bone guardians. Gold coal eyes fixed on impossible topology, where his ceramite-enhanced voice carried sacred frequencies through final transmission before silence claimed chambers, where mortuary mathematics encoded treachery risk through biological chemistry with prophetic accuracy. Twist resolution crystallized with bureaucratic horror as truth transcended tactical assessment into prophetic revelation that mocked imperial understanding of loyalty and betrayal. 312 pattern wasn't tune or pylon sequence, but coordinate grid mapped to bone growth rates and devotional cadence, method for growing bone forge wherever sufficient bones and prayers intersected through harmonic resonance, creating biological networks, processing mathematics through organic chemistry, with accuracy exceeding blessed cogitators. Mathematical progression encoded in hydroxyapatite crystal structure functioned as infection vector. Mnemonic pathogens spreading through devotional frequencies, while calcium structures learned to dream of resurrection through harmonics that bypassed auditory processing, to resonate directly in primitive brain centers, governing reverence and terror. Every prayer became potential seed for mortuary engine calculating empires dead, with accuracy transcending loyalty coefficients into prophetic calculations where saints' bones processed consciousness through biological chemistry rather than blessed silicon circuits, making ossuary into cogitator and devotion into dangerous mathematics, encoded grain by grain into living scripture. Now encoded in my marrow through biological interface requiring genetic verification, microscopic channels analyzed signature through blood chemistry, while 3-1-2 rhythms synchronized completely with pulse until heartbeat became countdown to theological catastrophe, carried within flesh and titanium. Containment ending required terror exile, bearing silence wedge locked in skeleton as living shrine never to be opened, biological repository carrying dangerous knowledge away from holy terror, where saints' bones had learned to sing mathematics through frequencies older than fear. Religious cadence provided closure through liturgical authority, while duty and corruption harmonized in electromagnetic resonance, from dust to duty, from duty to dust, endless cycle of service and sacrifice, transcending rosette authority into theological paradox, where emperor's light maintained eternal vigil against encroaching darkness through wound held open by will surpassing mortal comprehension, making me eternal ward against geometry that remembered dead better than living could forget. Cosmic stinger manifested through innocent corruption, spreading like mnemonic plague across devotional networks. In basilica above, pilgrim child with soot-smeared cheeks hummed three-note pattern without knowing why. Infection spreading through devotional fervor, while harmonic frequencies bypassed conscious resistance to resonate directly in calcium matrices throughout sacred architecture. The child's voice carried undertones of ancient tallow mixed with formaldehyde traces, while primitive brain centers spiked with recognition of pattern older than imperial doctrine. Biological handshake creating network of responsive nodes, communicating through frequencies that made servo-skull optical arrays flicker without authorization, teaching bone to process treachery calculations. Through organic chemistry, with accuracy mocking blessed cogitators, processing loyalty through silicon circuits, rather than living scripture written in marrow and devotion. Negative space finale dominated through absence rather than presence, as I noted without comment that for single heartbeat, I could not hear Astronomicon under boots. Eternal thunder replaced by black delta of silence, tasting of void and forgotten prayers, before divine emanation resumed carrying echo from somewhere deep within bones where wedge nested like patient parasite. Seal slammed shut with finality while planet breathed through palace foundations. Bones remembering me carrying their song to distant stars where 3-1-2 pattern would pulse with each heartbeat, making me living coordinate, preventing dangerous mathematics from settling into permanent altar, while infection spread through innocent devotion across galaxy like prophetic plague teaching calcium to calculate betrayal with theological accuracy, transcending imperial understanding of consciousness and death.